Hi guys, hope you're well on this Friday afternoon. It's April the 10th. Welcome to Ask James. For those who are new, for whatever reason, doesn't look like looking through the chat that there is anyone new. My name's James. I'm one half of the Planet FPL podcast. This is my regular Friday stream on YouTube, which I'll probably convert into an audio later. As usual, as this works, guys, there is no script, no plan to this, so this just goes off whatever is in the chat. So if there's nothing in the chat, we won't be talking about a lot today. So let's get in the chat. Hope everybody's well, staying safe, keeping clean, etc. I see our friend Andy from Let's Talk FPL is in the chat. He says, I was just talking about football memories. My earlier genuine memory was when I was 8, but I only barely remember the match. I more remember where I watched it, who I was with. And he goes on to say, what's your proper first memory, rather than perhaps something you may remember more from having seen so many clips since? Unfortunately, a lot of memories that I have, which Andy kind of points out there, are very much influenced by what you see back on TV. That's how you then remember it. Unfortunately, one of the things I try and do now when I'm at games is I try not to watch the replays on the screen at the time. And one of the reasons for that is I really like to try and, particularly if it's a good game and the team's winning, etc., I try and hold the memories of the game. So like when I was in Amsterdam, I didn't watch any of the replays of anything till I got back to England. I just didn't want to see it. I wanted to try and hold the memory of being there as long as possible. And I think for me, I understand what Andy's saying. I actually remember more where I was. So I can remember when I first got my season ticket at Spurs when I was 6. I remember looking at the scoreboard. I remember my position in the ground. I don't remember so much the specifics of what happened. I can remember little things in my mind from that season, but a lot of it now, as nearly 30 years on, is so influenced by what you see back in terms of highlights. And that's why, like, my memories of the 90s for Spurs, watching so many old VHS tapes over and over again through boredom in the summer, is what really influences the fact that I can just reel off the games like that from that period, similar to then the noughties. And actually, it's more the more recent years I struggle with a lot more. Sometimes you remember games, like I remember loads of games in terms of being absolutely shit, but having a great day in the pub. So I think my first memories, Andy, is where I sat at Spurs, things like the scoreboard. That's what I remember from the first game, really, is the scoreboard on the West Stand saying Tottenham v Man City, the opening game of the 1991 season, rather than actual memories. But from that particular season, the 2 games at Wembley, the semi-final with Arsenal and the final with Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup, I remember really well. Again, I can remember vividly being in the tunnel end at Wembley and looking up at the scoreboard with 10 minutes gone and it's saying Arsenal 0, Tottenham 2, and thinking, wow. And I remember that the scoreboard had like a 10 and a circle around it. I remember that better than the game, which is really annoying. But then the final itself, I can still visualize Des Walker's own goal like I'm there. Even though I was only like 7, and I remember the announcer in the ground announcing that Gary Mabbott scored. It wasn't like till we got home that we knew it was an own goal, because it was at the other end of the pitch. I remember that very vividly. I remember that, seeing that and the ball going in. I also remember crying my eyes out at half time when we was 1-0 down and Gascoigne had been stretchered off and Lineker had missed the penalty. He had a goal disallowed for offside, which we later found out was onside. Those are my earliest memories, Andy. Jeff Holt's in the chat, says hi James, and also saying hi to Andy. Everyone's in saying hi to Andy. Let's get a plug for Let's Talk FPL here. Martin Boyle saying similar. Jeff Holt saying no trivia today, James, saving that for next Thursday. There's a bit of a reveal there. I'm not allowed to say yet because the official account's not announced it yet, but I am pleased to say a couple of collabs I'm doing. I'm going to be sitting down later tonight with Lee and Sam from FPL Family, talking a bit of Spurs and Liverpool. We're going to look back on last year's Champions League season for both Liverpool and Tottenham. That's going to be a load of fun. I think the guys will release that on Sunday night. Also pleased to say that the guys have just tweeted it out as well that I'm going to be going on the Wolfpack pod this week. They've invited me to be part of their quiz. Idiots. I don't know what they're letting themselves in for, do they? Before I wrap this up, I'll let you know what we're doing content-wise next week as well, because I have decided what we're doing with quiz and Thursday throwback and the likes. Angus McPhail's in the chat. He says, hello. Jeff Holt says, if you had to make up an all-time Arsenal team, oh my God, why are you doing that to me? Jesus Christ. A lot of it would be the 90s and the early noughties, to be totally true. I can't remember too much about the 80s, 70 teams and that, but you've got that sort of Charlie George from the 70s would probably be in. Liam Brady, obviously, from late 70s, 80s. I guess they'd find a place in the midfield with like perhaps Vieira and Perez. You'd still have to go like Henry and Bergkamp up front, wouldn't you? I think even over Van Persie. And the back four would be very much of that 90s team, wouldn't it? Like Winterburn, Adams, Dixon. I think you'd probably go Keown over Bold, David Seaman in goal. There you go. That was relatively painful. Let's not talk about that too much more. Martin Ball hopes we're all well. Jeff Holt realizes that was tough but interesting. Andy is doing well. Hopes everybody else is as well. He just has this on while doing a bit of work, background. He just has this on in the background while he's doing some work. Good for you, mate. Jeff's asking, did you get registered for CM? Andy, did you get registered for CM? Alex Dyke says, hello. Jeff Holt, who has been the best captain in Spurs history? Perryman, question. Yeah, probably yes, but for longevity, but hard to look past, obviously, Danny Blanchflower from the 61 double team. That would be one more for me, Dad. I'd go back and ask him maybe, but I guess it would be between those two. I suspect the right answer is Danny, actually, Danny Blanchflower. Rob Chetty. I do the same with United. Oh, should I do it? Best ever United team? Oh, that's tough, isn't it? Because then you really have got more like sort of Law, Besh, Charlton. God, how many would be in there? You'd have to have like Giggs, Ronaldo. You'd have to go in. Wouldn't they? Rooney's got to be a shout as record United goal scorer. Christ, the pick in the front line for United would be really difficult. Andy says, one of my best nights out was when United lost in the Champions League final to Barca. Such a good night. Once the beer kicked in and the final whistle had gone. I enjoyed my nights out watching those as well. I was watching them in a pub in Wood Green. Actually nearly got in a fight during the game at Wembley because I really pissed off some United fans when Barca scored. It was a group of us all Spurs fans. I've said many times I kind of have a fondness for Barcelona through links when I first started going to football through Venables, Lineker, Naeem, etc. And United started that 11 final quite well. And then Barca got hold of the ball, and that was the end of it. We kind of let them know that they'd had their 10 minutes. And when United equalised, they started getting a bit leery about it. But yeah, Barca were just too good, man. And they were also astonishing against United in that Rome final a few years earlier. Jeff Holt, have you met any footballers or other celebrities? Suj is a celeb, isn't he? I'm not going to reveal who because he may not want me to, but somebody is putting together a video of people in the community doing kick-ups. Wait till you see Suj. It just looks like he's a Morris dancer trying to do football kick-ups. It's hilarious. When you see that video, you will know what I mean, and you won't be able to get Suj Morris dancing out of your head. I can't wait for him to do this penalty shootout with me when it's safe to do it. He's not got a prayer, mate. I've seen him kick a ball now. All that Indian KDB shit, he's talking out of his arse, mate. Have I met any footballers? I've been close to a number, Jeff. I often feel like they just wouldn't want to be bothered. I'm not talking about clubs and stuff here. I mean, like outside the ground or stuff like that. I've seen Ledley drive past me. I stopped in front of him, made sure he ran me over if necessary. I've met Ledley very briefly at his book signing and stuff, and a few others at certain events. There's a few I saw quite often around Wembley. You'd see them around David Howes, Paul Allen, a few others, Mark Falco. But I never went and spoke to them. I just feel like these guys just don't want to be bothered. Frodo's in the chat. It says, good afternoon. Kareem Gomez. Hey, James, which are your 3 favourite away grounds and why? I would go for, I'm going to pick non-English ones. I'm sorry. Bernabeu is the best stadium that I've been to, in my opinion. I would go for Signal Iduna Park. Borussia Dortmund is an awesome place. Absolutely fantastic. And regrettably, I'm not the new camp. I was so disappointed with it in terms of like its facilities, the way Spurs fans were treated on that. I might talk about this a bit on FPL Family, actually. It was just such a letdown. I mean, I thought when Moura scored in Barcelona, I thought we were going to go. Like, the place was so rickety and old. And so I'd probably go San Siro, which also facility-wise was shit, but that was my first away Champions League game. And when you kind of pull up off the tram and you get dropped off and then you're outside, this, I mean, the San Siro from outside is an astonishing sight. So I'd probably go Madrid, Dortmund, and then into /AC is the San Siro. But San Siro inside, it's a hilarious place. If you went in that ground and you needed a dump, you were in trouble. The shitter was the hole on the floor. It wasn't a toilet, it was a hole on the floor. So just nobody was shitting, mate, and people were standing there pissing there. What are you going to do? Squat and shit. There was no door on nothing. There was no door to shut it. One of the best stadiums in the world, supposedly, but the facilities were awful. I mean, that's going back to 2010. I don't know if they've upgraded that since. Mehboob Khan says, if this season is not concluded, will any teams be relegated, or will Villa, Norwich, etc. play in the Premier League next season? I don't know. I suspect this is something that's probably coming up, maybe people's poll Tuesday-wise and that, because it's very interesting following what the talks are in Scotland at the moment, where there's a proposal perhaps for Hearts, who are bottom of the Scottish Premier League, to perhaps be relegated. It looks like they're getting to a stage where below the Scottish Premier League, the rest of that season is going to be voided. And then from a pyramid perspective, that then has a real knock-on effect. If the Scottish Premier League is voided, there is a suggestion perhaps that Hearts are relegated. I must say, it's perhaps a personal opinion on Scottish football, but I have no idea why that is 4 divisions and they play each other 4 times or 3 times and then split 4 times. Why don't they just have 2 bloody leagues of 20 teams? I don't understand it. They must get, Aberdeen and Motherwell playing each other like 4 times every. They must be sick of each other. Wouldn't it be nice to have some fresh teams in there going up against the likes of Rangers and Celtic? We know it'd still be a 2-team league and that, but I just never understood why it didn't become a 20-team league. I guess it's a little bit about money as well. You'd be putting a lot of, with respect, the likes of Ross Counties and Inverness Caledonian Thistles. You'd just be bringing like another 10 of them in terms of club size into the league, wouldn't you? But it might be better off for sides like Hearts, the Dundee clubs, Aberdeen's, I mentioned Hibernian. I don't know. I just never understood that. Perhaps it's a chance for them to reform. There's been a suggestion about changing the reform of the pyramid of that. Perhaps it's a good opportunity to do that and go, okay, right, yeah, sod it, we're voided. Let's go 20 teams next season. That seems like a great idea for them. That's the sort of thing then when you go, oh, okay, there's pluses here for a lot of people. And I'm sure if you go down to their League 2 or whatever, there'll be some disappointed people. But, I mean, then you know if you win it again the next year, then you're not going into the League 1, are you? Going into their Premier League and the chance to play against those big Scottish sides. The Premier League's more difficult. The problem with the Premier League in England not finishing currently is the massive payouts in terms of to TV, etc. If it's not completed, I really believe the Premier League will finish whenever it finishes, even if that's in 2021. We can't play football till 2021. I still think we'll finish this season. I can't see a way around that. The problem is, like, when they start filtering down and voiding what's below, I don't know. Are they then in a catch-up season while we finish this one? It becomes really awkward. You'd like to think from top to bottom the same thing was all in place, but I understand the clubs under financial difficulty need some security and understanding of where they're going, where football's going. I think we'll finish. I think if we were to be in a position where, I don't know, they say it's October and we've got to start a new football season rather than finish this one, then I don't think the likes of Villa, Norwich, Bournemouth would be relegated. I just think it would be incredibly unfair. I think you could still award Liverpool the championship. I think everybody would accept that's okay. I think for those teams to be relegated would be incredibly harsh. It would be harsher on them to be relegated rather than not bringing, say, Leeds and West Brom up. Even though they're doing really well in the championship, there's a way to go. And all right, they're in front, but it's harsher for those who may go down. Who are, like Villa have got a game in hand, and if they win it, they're out. You can't relegate them. It's not right. There's a lot of talk about average points per game, but you're playing towards a conclusion of 38 games, not a conclusion of 29 or whatever it is. So, yeah, I strongly believe still that no matter what, we will finish this current Premier League season, even if it's like behind closed doors at St George's Park or whatever, and it's finished over a 3-4 week period. Rob Chetty saying surely Ian Wright over Bergkamp for greatest ever Arsenal team. Yeah, I can't go against that with the number of goals Wright scored. How'd you leave Bergkamp out though? And we're saying difficult, and Arsenal fans would answer that better than me. You know, who would they pick? Would they go Ian Wright and Henry or Bergkamp? Henry obviously has to be in there. I don't think you could leave Bergkamp out personally. Nick Griffiths in the chat saying hello. Andy says I've signed up for Championship Manager, but they've said it might be game week 5 before we can get in, which is cool. Yeah, the guys have had some difficulties this week with the processing of the sheets and they always anticipated there would be some sort of problems along this route that they're taking. The astonishing work they've done to put this game together, where they're trying to prioritise the people who had rolled a transfer who have still only got one transfer. They should obviously have 2 free transfers. And I think quite rightly they're looking after their people that are already in the game first. So they've come out and said, yeah, look, sorry, it's probably not going to be till game week 5. It's a major benefit for Andy and the likes there in the sense that they won't have Charlton players in their squad when they will essentially be wildcard in game week 5, and they're going to get some sort of points to compensate them as well. Owen Kinnear's asking what my overall rank is in Champ, man. I had a small red arrow from game week 3, although I was above the average. And I'm down to 77th join, which really good start. Happy with that. I'm about 35 points off the leader or something. So really pleased. I wasn't one of these in the background who's done the Sims or something. But very, very long way to go. There are 35 game weeks to go, but thoroughly enjoying it, as you know. Fred Halverson says, are you going to play the live FPL by Rag Bolly, James? No, I'm not. I'm committed to the Champman FPL guys and what they've done, and I'm supporting them, and I'm doing that only. Jean Linden, that's me mum, says, Dad says yes to Danny B, Danny Blanchflower. So there you go to Jeff's earlier question of Danny Blanchflower, Steve Perriman. My dad won't be round with me this time. That's good. Nick Griffith, you much of a tennis fan? See, Wimbledon got bailed out on pandemic insurance, paid $2 million a year for the last 70 years, but paid out $142 million due to coronavirus. Yeah, me and the wife were discussing this last night. What an incredible thing they've managed to do there. They're basically the only major sport who were insuring themselves, or major tournament, should I say, rather than sport, that Wimbledon have insured themselves against cancellation due to a pandemic. And they've been doing that for the last 17 years, I think. It must be 18. Yeah, 17 years. I think they paid $34 million so far. And as Nick said, they're due to get $142 million in compensation for losing that tournament this year. So Wimbledon's all right. They're okay. Let's Talk FPL saying, I ended up sleeping on a roundabout near a McDonald's drive-thru waiting for it to open at 6 a.m. for breakfast. I presume that's following his Manchester United Champions League final defeat. FPL Corv's in the chat. Thank you, Corv, for the amazing graphic you put together last night as well. If you want to put something together, which I can do in sort of like a 16:9 for the Champ Man live stream tomorrow, bring it on, mate. Did you ever visit Ninian Park, James? I think it was 2007 the last time you lot visited before we moved. 0-0 in the cup, taking it back to White Hart Lane. No, I didn't. The game was on the TV, and I know there was trouble. I know there was big trouble because in the replay, which we won 4-0, you've never seen a scene like it before a game at White. I'm not lying. So there was no trouble, but there wasn't allowed to be any trouble. Basically, every Cardiff fan who came for the replay had to go on a coach. I don't know if you went, Corf. I had to go on a coach, and they actually built on what was the Park Lane, which is now the home end, but it used to be away/home. They built up like a wall to let people in. So the only people who get into, you couldn't walk all the way around the ground like you can now at most places. And so the Cardiff coaches actually got dropped in there outside the ground and locked in, and they weren't allowed to go anywhere else. And that was the only way Cardiff fans were getting in. And the amount of Tottenham that were waiting for them, ready for it to go. I've never seen a scene like it. Even the petition in the ground, you know, like you get the kind of covering off of 3 rows. Nah, it was about 3 blocks. Spurs won that replay very, very well. I know there was some trouble at Ninian Park in those cup games in the early noughties. I think Leeds had also had some trouble when they went there. When Cardiff beat them, I think that was 2001, maybe in the 3rd round. I actually backed Leeds to win the cup that year. That's why I remember that really well. No, I didn't go. I'd be more than happy to go to the new stadium if you come back up. I've been to Swansea. Had a great night at Swansea. Me and my dad 1-0 down with a minute to go and won 3-1 when we were pushing Chelsea. That was I shrieked like a girl when Sonny put us in front. That was a good night. Andy saying recorded his clip for the video yesterday. Wish I'd done more keep you uppies. Andy, I've seen your video, mate. I've seen it. It's nice. So BC1, hi James. Do you listen to J. Cole, as in Joe Cole, on BT, for example? Is that what you're asking me, Sabisi? I think Joe Cole's all right as analysis, actually, quite surprisingly. Brad Lewington's in the chat. He's saying afternoon. Jeff Holt says, James and Sturridge have been granted Roy of the Rovers type skills. As a result, Spurs and West Ham have recruited them in as star players. It is time for me. You're going to take us through the match report, are you, Jeff? I just hope I don't cut this stream before you finish the match report. That'd be a bit weird. Do you know what, Jeff? Why don't you just write it in a match report, pop it in an article, post it on Twitter, and we'll give it a share, mate. Rob Chetty, if United signed Sancho in the transfer window and a top centre-back or CDM, right, so now we've got 3 players, Rob, do you think they could compete next season with the likes of Liverpool and City? No. I think they're still miles off. I think they need more than that. Compete, generally, have shown even this season they can. They've beaten City 3 times in 4 games. They very nearly beat Liverpool at Old Trafford in, was that October time? But no, I think they're a way off. We did have a question on Monday's podcast. Someone asked in who would be closest to the 2 if I thought someone could break out and push them next year. And actually said Chelsea, just because I think the youthfulness in that squad, they've got the capability to have that kind of breakout, one unbelievable year. There's people in that squad like Loftus-Cheek we haven't even seen this year. I think Chelsea would need a top forward and better centre defender and better goalkeeper to get to that position. But they could have a one. If Liverpool and City drop their levels and were sort of 10, 15 points inferior next year, I think Chelsea is the most likely to push on. United are always going to be there, aren't they? Because they've got the power to spend that money, and we're going to be in a real kind of, I guess, let's call it a transfer economic crisis when we come out the other end of this. And United are going to be one of those clubs who are going to still be able to pay the money for Sancho and that. And I think they're going to be possibly almost standing alone in that respect because of what they make commercially and sponsorship, etc. Although I guess commercially wise, they're losing a hell of a lot at the moment to what they would forecast, etc. So they've got to be a little cautious in terms of how they work that going forward. Brad Lewington, have you ever been to Rome Stadium? If so, what's it like? I have tickets for the Euros there and was supposed to go this summer. I'll be going next year now. No, we played Lazio in the UEFA Cup. Both games were 0-0 home and away. We were very lucky in Rome. It would have been 2012, I think. And no, it was never really a conversation to go. Rome's dangerous, actually. I think you've seen Celtic fans have been there very recently. There was terrible trouble when Middlesbrough played Roma back in the mid-noughties. I think Liverpool fans have had troubles there a few times. He's quite dangerous, so it's never really appealed to me. It's basically a bridge you have to go over. It's the only way into the stadium, so I'm told, and they just wait for you. There's no other way. So Rome never really appealed to me. It's also, although historic, it's got the athletics track and all that shit. You know, if I want to go to football and have an athletics track in front of me, I'd just go to West Ham. Owen Kinnear, thoughts on Scotland having a vote and finishing on average points? It's interesting. I think we probably, Owen, we're going to put this in the people's poll about what's happening in Scotland, actually. I think it's a really interesting one to follow. Their circumstance, just very briefly to add on the points I made 10 minutes ago or so, is very difficult because the financial issues for those clubs who rely so much, say, on playing Rangers, Celtic, etc., can be quite catastrophic to the extent that there's clubs even in the Scottish Premier League who are going to be in huge, huge trouble. Owen's adding on what I'd said earlier about the league being split because of 4 TV games between the old firm. Yeah, I understand that, but we always get like 6, don't we? Because we always meet each other in the cups anyway. So I think bigger. You know, what would happen to Scottish football if Rangers and Celtic weren't in it? Because Rangers and Celtic don't want to be a part of it. If the Premier League suddenly went, come on, they wouldn't think twice to leave in Scotland. Scotland's got to do what's best for Scotland. And all right, yeah, so they get a bit of extra TV money because there's Rangers and Celtic play each other 4 times. But how many times do they want to show Dunfermline against Celtic at like 12 o'clock on a Sunday? Nah, I really think they should go to a 20-team league. I've always held that belief. Let's talk FPL says, apologies if you've covered this on one of your pods. What do you think about armchair fans, those who perhaps live far away from grounds, can't get down every week? Are they less of a fan? I used to think that, I'll be very honest. I feel a lot less about it now. With the current economic situation in terms of how expensive it is to go to football, etc. I think me now with a little one start thinking about how much this boy is potentially going to cost me in the future and start thinking, I hope he's a bloody gymnast instead. So I get it a lot more now than I used to be. I used to be a little bit arrogant about how much I went to games in comparison to other people, but I don't feel that way as such now. You know, probably in the forthcoming years, I'm probably not going to be able to go to as many away games as I have done previously, for example. So I get it a lot more now. I think it's somewhat strange that people from other countries are so into one specific club for whatever. Perhaps they think their league's shit, and you know they've followed it's a growing cycle, isn't it, of following individual players. So like Spurs have quite a big following in Norway, for example, because we had like Erik Thorsvedt in the early 90s and stuff, and I think Liverpool then had a few Norwegian players. They've got quite a following out there as well. So no, listen, it's 2020, so I think it's quite archaic to have those opinions now that they're less of a fan. You know, I still get my priority through my loyalty points, etc., which allows me to go to many of the away games, etc. And I've earned that. You know, that armchair fan doesn't then suddenly, if Spurs gets a cup final, deserve the right to get a cup final ticket, for example. So it is balances, but for them to be less of a fan, nah, I don't think so necessarily. FB Lucky, FB Lucka, who would win all-time English Spurs 11 versus all-time rest of the world Spurs 11? You can choose whether you want to answer briefly or actually work out the 11s. My God. Let me come back to that because that needs. But I know in my head what would be the favourite Spurs team that I've seen in my lifetime. To go back further, you probably have. See, the thing is as well. You say English. If I can add in a few of the Scottish players like Dave Mackay and that from the 60s and make it a British team versus an all-time rest of the world, I'd probably go to British guys. Actually, believe it or not, yeah. Yeah, I think I'd probably go to British, I would think. Nick Griffith, did you get to visit the Bowling Ground and Highbury? 2 grounds I never got to go to, which I have massive regrets over. What's your thoughts on the 2? My thoughts are, Nick, you missed fuck all, mate. They're both shitholes. I went to Highbury. I went to every Spurs away game at Highbury between 90 and 97. And it just became too shit, man. In terms of like the view of the game, and then suddenly these games were always on telly. shit. If you ended up, it used to give you a bit on the end of on the corner of the clock end, which was okay. But then they used to give you a little bit on the west. I think it was the west stand. Yeah, it would have been the west stand as well. And if you were too far back on the west stand, you couldn't see shit, mate. I remember we lost there 3-1 the last time we went 96, 97. Me and Dad just moved. Like, there was nothing to be seen from the seat we had in the ground. If it went higher than 15 feet, you couldn't see the ball. So it was a shithole. West Ham was also a shithole. In a shithole. So no, you didn't miss much there. They rebuilt three sides of it and then decided to go and play in an athletic stadium. You didn't miss much. The one thing I always felt about West Ham, people used to talk about the atmosphere there. I never felt it. The last time I went was when Antonio scored, and I remember going with my mate Harry that night and saying to him, this atmosphere is going to be so fire that night. And it just wasn't. Even though it was a midweek game, was a big fuss made over it. I've been to other places you wouldn't expect the atmosphere to be so good, and it's been very good, for example. I just don't like either of them anyway. So I don't think much of the Emirates now either, in terms of the lower tiers are so flat, man. Shit. You sit in the back row of the lower tiers and away fan, you'll struggle to see the edge of the penalty area line at the other end, never mind the goal line, in terms of making out the lines. I always like a high vantage point so I can get a perspective of the game. Like, I went to St Mary's in the Cup in January. All right, it's decent views, like row 6 or something. You've got no perspective of the game. If you ask me, like, tactically what happened in the game, I can't tell you. You're too low. You get certain insights in terms of your respect for the players at that low level, and you understand more how difficult it is for them. But I always prefer a high view. I would rather be in the gods at Newcastle than down the front. I've always felt that. Jeff Holt says, which stadiums that are now gone would you like to bring back, maybe to visit one more time? That's a more interesting one. I think grounds I didn't go to, like, I never went to Main Road at Man City. Is maybe one. Filbert Street was a shithole. So was the baseball ground. So my dad will tell you. But I never went to these grounds. So yeah, maybe some of those that would have been gone and passed. If you ask me which stadium would I like to bring back, it's the original White Hart Lane, Jeff. FPL Decanu, sorry if I butchered your name there, pal. Hello, James, and greetings from Romania. I've got 2 questions. After World Cup in '94, the US Spurs bought 2 players that were more expensive than Klinsmann, same nationality. Remember anything about them? Of course I do. Ili Dumitrescu was part of the famous Spurs front 5 Cavalier. Didn't last too long, Ili. He was a very good player, but he was the one who... it was the sacrificial lamb to give Spurs a more balanced lineup, basically, when Jerry Francis took over. And he had a brief spell at West Ham afterwards. Georgi Popescu I really liked. Popescu was one of the first ones I got on the back of my shirt, actually. And he had one average season for Spurs. Good ball player. He was bought originally to play as a sweeper in a back 3. Then ended up as basically the holding midfield player. And he could play, Georgie, but he didn't like a tackle. He bottled out of a tackle in the semi-final against Everton, and the fans had enough of him after that. He went to Barcelona that summer straight afterwards, and then scored the winning penalty for Galatasaray against Arsenal in the 2000 UEFA Cup final in Copenhagen. I think it was that year. So remember Georgie a bit fondly. That was he wore number 4, and that was the number I started wearing as a kid, playing similar position to him. So that's why I took a liking to him. He has another question. It says, CMFPL, how come West Ham United defence didn't get -2 for conceding 4 like in FPL? Hidden rule. I don't know the answer to that. Kareem Gomez, given Tottenham status and finances, which player would be your number 1 priority? I mean, what kind of money have I got, Kareem? I don't know. Spurs ain't buying anyone. I'm telling you, I ain't buying anyone. If I can get Ndombele to be the player that I thought he could be, then that's better than any signing. So Spurs desperately need particularly a right back, and obviously a really good central midfield player. But Ndombele needs to be that player. He's going to have to try and be that footballer. So it's not worth speculating. If I could go and buy anyone, I'd go and get Thiago from Bayern Munich. That would be my choice. Why he would come? Like, no, why would he come? But if there was no money spared, you want to go and get me that type of player. That's the player I'd want to get. What a footballer he is, Alcantara. Joe Finley Badders in the chat. He says, "Hi James, currently finishing off my dissertation on nationality rules used by FIFA to decide whether players are eligible to play for a certain country. Your thoughts on the current system?" I.e. Declan Rice, Ireland to England switch. I'm not a fan of it, I must say. I've always had an issue with this whole grandparent thing, and now you've got the nationality thing where Spurs could have been picking like Arteta and Kudachini and Almunia and people like that. I mean, England probably should have picked them, but I would have been uncomfortable with it. It just doesn't sit right. I really think you should play for the country of your birth, or where your immediate parents are from, one or the other. That's what I believe. So yeah, interesting. Send us that dissertation when you're done. I've got a bit of spare time on my hands. Sabisi, do you listen to Kendrick Lamar and Drake? Do I look like I listen to fucking Kendrick Lamar and Drake? Sven Ingram, hi James, hope you're keeping well. I am, Stephen, hope you are too. Let's talk FPL. That Gareth Bale lad wasn't bad for the British team either. No, I don't suppose he was. And Cliff Jones as well. So yeah, that British. If it was a British Spurs team versus a foreign Spurs team, or rest of the world rather, then yeah, I'd fancy the British team of all time actually. Martin Boyle, who do you think would win a tournament of best 11 players in the Premier League versus best 11 in the Liga versus best 11 in Ligue 1 versus best 11 in Bundesliga versus best 11 in Serie A? There must have been a short form way you could have written that, Martin. La Liga, I would suspect. Pick the best from Barca Madrid would make up a lot, I think. Benny Blanco on Armchair Fans. A lot of the more knowledgeable football fans I know were very good footballers themselves and always playing football on a Saturday at 3 p.m. and didn't get to go to many games. Yeah, it's true. He says, I'm sure I remember a best of the English league played best of Italian league once. Did I dream that? No, it probably did happen. There used to be things between Italy and Italy. Some of the older viewers and listeners may remember the Anglo-Italian Cup between what would now be the Championship and Serie B. There used to be links. I wouldn't be surprised if that did happen, Benny, but I don't know. That's not impossible. NBA has like West Conference versus East Conference, don't they, and stuff like that. I think MLS have done something very similar with their regions. I don't know if we'd ever see that sort of thing. Yeah, where would you sort out what's north and south? Where would the Midlands go and stuff like that? I don't know. Jeff Holt said, I will simulate Spurs versus West Ham on FIFA with you and Sudge as creative players with max rating. I'll let you know the score. You do that, Jeff, but I can tell you already that Spurs are winning that, mate. Owen Kinnear, worst team to ever win the Champions League European Cup. I wish you was asking me that and I could have said Tottenham last season. The Liverpool 05 team was shit, mate. And nobody remembers that because of obviously what happened in Istanbul, etc. But that Liverpool team was awful. Awful. I still can't tell you how they won it, which is what makes it so miraculous. You think of the players in that team: Carragher, Gerrard, Cole, Didi Hamann came on and made a difference. Steve Finnan was a good right back. John Arnorisa was a good player. Smeaton was all right. I mean, it wasn't a great team, was it? Let's be honest. I mean, the current Liverpool team would murder them. So I would go Liverpool 05 were shocking. But credit to them, they beat Milan, they beat a very good Chelsea in the semi, Juventus in the quarter final. They had a good run. They deserved to win it in the end, but they were a poor side. Nick Griffith said, who's the player in your youth setup you have the most hope for? It was certainly young Troy Parrott has got a lot of potential if he can get his head in the right place. He's got the potential to be a very, very good centre forward. But very difficult now with kids at their age and thinking they're going to be the thing. Sometimes players emerge, like Kane always had a good record for Spurs youth teams, but people didn't ever expect that you'd even be a first team player. Just didn't expect it. And look, we achieved. Whereas now the pressure's on Parrott. I've seen people like John Bostock who the first time I saw him, I was like, wow, this kid's going to be it. I never saw him again. He disappeared off the earth. So just so happens with players, isn't it? Look at, say, like Jermaine Pennant. Arsenal paid $2 million for him when he was 15. And it's, you know, that's kind of about 20 years. It's the equivalent of like 10 odd million now or something. And you know, outside interference always got in the way of his life. I don't know if he's written a book, Jermaine Pennant, but I bet that'd be a bloody good read. Owen Kinnear says, seen Thiago at the Bridge this season, ran the game and was world class. I'll be honest, I thought he was a tad overrated till that game. I think he's an absolute worldie. I think he's not as good as he should be, Owen. I would say that. I don't think he's got the oomph to want to be as good as like Iniesta or Xavi were, but technically he is as good as those players. It's the other facets that put him way behind those other two as comparables, for example. He is a worldie, though. FPL Chance said, Dumitrescu got properly stitched up by the News of the World. I don't remember that, Dan. What happened there? Really don't remember that. It's a BC1. Which team is in worse state, Real Madrid or Barcelona? I can't say I've watched a lot of La Liga this year. It's the first thing, to be very honest. But I think Madrid are a shadow of what they were a couple of years ago, having obviously watched them against Manchester City. I think both squads have an issue with aging players, which often happens when you have great players that they hold on and stay in the squad for too long. I think we see that with like United's Ferguson when he left, etc. So I don't think either are in the best state. I mean, if the Champions League was to restart, the team that I would fancy most to challenge Man City is Bayern Munich. And yeah, I watched Liverpool in Munich last year, and it's the worst Munich team I'd seen in certainly 10, 15 years. But watching them against Spurs, my God. And as Owen says earlier in the chat, I mean, destroyed Chelsea as well. They're a top side again now. Hip Hop 07 Legendary says Jimmy Traore, yeah, part of that Liverpool 05 team. Says, not sure if anyone else has asked you this before, James. What's your personal football playing experience? Personal, played Sunday League football, played for mid school. Yeah, that's nothing to write home about particularly. It's probably a podcast further down the line on that. I played in a cup final when I was 13. I was on the losing side and was given man of the match, and we knew there were scouts there. I never got picked up because I was too short. Simple as that. It's too short. This was at a time when you had people like Vieira bursting into the game and that. 10 years later, I'd have had a better chance. Short passing, retaining the ball in midfield, etc., spreading it out wide. I would have had a better chance. I didn't have the physical. Everyone was looking for physical attributes then. So, Joe Finley Bader, when I go to Watford games, I prefer being in the lower rows. I feel close to the action, but also admit you can't really understand the tactics of the game from that low down. I obsessed with within 60 seconds wanting to know how both teams are lining up. As first thing, I'll be in Dad's ear. Dad is 3 at the back. Dad is 4 at the back. Ali's playing wide. Whatever. I'll be in his ear in the first minute, telling him what's happening. That's all I'm looking for in the first minute of a football match, and that's really difficult from a low down perspective, particularly if it changes during game. Really difficult to pick that sort of thing up, and territorially it's really difficult sometimes. If you're on the side, it's not so bad, but if you're low behind the goal, it's very difficult to understand certain patterns and territorial. I always prefer to be high. FPL Chancellor says Dumitrescu was involved in a prostitute sting, which was a complete lie, but got him into strife with Spurs. I need to look into that, Dan. I've got no recollection of that at all. Can you at me on Twitter with anything you find on that, pal? I've got no recollection of that at all. Benny Blanco has slipped from the lofty heights of 981st on Champman and now off the spreadsheet and into the wilderness. It's cold and dark out here. Help. Wildcard activated. Mate, you're below Surge. You're in trouble. We will finish on this from Angus McPhail, and then I will tell you what we are doing in terms of content next week. Angus McPhail says, I guess one of the only issues with Thiago and his brother Rafinha is that they both have very iffy knees. That's the only flaw, really. Top player. Oh, Jeff's gone, Jeff. Maria, Jeff's wife is in. is listening and would like to ask: is the percentage age of female fans at Spurs matches increasing, decreasing, or stable? Increasing. I don't know how it is for other clubs, but you always see women in the away ends traveling with Spurs. Always. One of my good friends, Spurs journo Emma, she travels over from Germany. She lives in Cologne. She's still got a season ticket. She travels over like every other week. She still goes to a lot of away games. We were meant to meet up and have a drink when we went to Southampton, actually, but she got held up because someone was trespassing near Felixstowe. I don't know. Or no, it wasn't Felixstowe. Sorry, Basingstoke, I think it was. So yeah, there's a few familiar faces I see away from home Spurs. Whenever I go, I think I always see you about away games, so fair games for. Yeah, and obviously because of how it is with the stadium now, etc. You know, it's built for families and whatnots. You can go behind the home end and have a big sing song if you want. There are other areas of the stadium where it can be a bit quieter, where they've catered for everybody. So there's a lot of women go to Spurs. I would say to Maria, Jeff, that it's increasing rather than decreasing. I think there was a period where when it went all seaters in the 90s, and this is kind of going before my time now, it was then encouraged for families to go to football. And then I think it went a bit wayward again, sort of in the late 90s and the early noughties. But yeah, women at football is coming back a lot more. Plus, obviously, the promotion of the women's games really helping with that. People don't feel like they're being marginalised so much, shall we say. And it is, Jeff, it's a bit different as a Londoners, because obviously we live in such a diverse city anyway. The likes of particularly Spurs and Arsenal. Arsenal have always had a very diverse support, and so do Spurs now as well. You know, see a lot of black people at Arsenal, same at Spurs. There isn't that stigma. You hear people talking about it all the time, like, oh, you know, you don't see blacks and Asians at football like I do at Spurs. So I don't hold. Me and Suj have spoken about this before, because we're in London. We're in a little bubble where we don't feel like there's a problem. I think it's more in other parts of the country, to be very honest. But yeah, certainly at Spurs, there's a lot more women going. Oh, we might as well carry on now. Martin Boyle, would you support the Premier League reducing the number of overseas players allowed in the squad from 17 to get more English players playing? I did put this in the poll a couple of months back. It didn't get voted in. I would support it, but the fear is that it's going to have a knock-on negative effect for performances in Europe. But yeah, I'm in favour of that. I always want some English players in the side. You know, it's people like Harry Winks and Harry Kane that still keep my connection with this football team that I don't really like at the moment, because I know they're like me. They give a shit. Notorious Nerd, who will be the most expensive signing this summer, considering clubs are in financial loss? I think we all think, Nerd, that Jadon Sancho is going to go to Manchester United. Neymar could go back to Barcelona, I guess. There's been some sort of Griezmann or someone else going the other way, isn't there? That's as likely as it's going to be. You ain't going to see Spurs paying like 80 million for a footballer. It's not happening. Daniel Levy has said it himself. People need to get like their head out of the sands and understand how big of a crisis this is. And there are going to be an elite few who are going to pull away further. And as much as I said, I'd see Chelsea at the moment as the most likely to challenge City or Liverpool. United obviously have the power. It's these power clubs that will pull through this and then stabilise the transfer market again. But you are going to see the disparity that we have now between the rich, the very good, and then let's call it the also-rans. I want a better term than that, but let's call them that. That between the rich and the good is going to widen. So that gap between Manchester United and Tottenham, for example, is going to, in terms of financial, in the short term, will widen. It will recover for Tottenham, because Tottenham eventually are going to blitz Manchester United in, say, stadium revenue and stuff like that. And it will level out because United will do so much more commercially. But in the short term, it's going to be a real problem for the likes of Tottenham. I suspect even Chelsea, Arsenal, and even City to a certain level as well. It's United's commercial stuff that will keep them as the ones who can really, really power. And from that perspective, I guess there's an opportunity for them to push on from that. Notorious Nerd asks, and This is another one that will probably go in the poll for Tuesday. Is it legal to extend contracts indefinitely with players whose deals are expiring? I don't have a good answer for that at the moment. It's something that I want to investigate. My understanding at the moment is that in terms of English law, if players want to walk away from their contracts on June the 30th, they can, and you can't stop them. It will be an individual case for a lot of people. You've got to remember as well, if we go lower leagues here, say you've got a team who's mid-table, can't get relegated, can't get promoted, and you can say, oh, they can extend. Let's say we finish the football season August, September. They can extend the contract to August, September, and then release them. They're better off playing a kid for 2 months. These players ain't going to get new contracts in a lot. So it's going to work both ways. It's a really, really, really interesting one. Owen Kinnear saying illegal in English law. Pretty sure. This is something we're going to investigate. So on that bombshell, thanks for the chat. Coming up, live stream tomorrow. Chatman FPL game week 4. Double game week 4, live 2:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Join me for a beer and a chat and a bit of fun. I'm really enjoying these streams. They're cracking. Sunday, you can catch me on FPL Family with Lee and Sam, talking about the Champions League from last season. Monday, Suj will be back, main podcast. Tuesday, People's Poll. It's going to be a little bit more investigative rather than sort of the best 11s we've done recently. I can reveal Wednesday's quiz will be on the European Championships of 1996. When football came home, I will be doing a quiz on that summer. Our Throwback podcast on Thursday. We did what I think was a really good piece yesterday on Graham Taylor's period in time of England and the failure of the England team to qualify for USA 94. So moving on a season, we are going to be on our Thursday Throwback looking at the Ajax Champions League winners of 1995. Not so much their run to winning the competition, but more that squad, that team of players. How outstanding were they? We'll look at their careers before, after, and drill into some of the individuals of that Ajax team from 1995. I'll be back doing this again next Friday. I'll stream, touch wood, for Chatman FPL Game Week 5, Wednesday night as well. I'll also be on the Wolfpack. I'm not sure when they're releasing it. And you can also catch me. I'm not allowed to reveal who yet, but I'll be on YouTube somewhere next Thursday night, I believe, as well. So all systems go. Lots happening. Trying to keep myself busy. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys. Those on the chat, etc. Stay safe. Be nice to each other. It's shit out there. Honestly, just keep being nice to each other. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Ciao for now. Cue music, man, child.